Welcome back to Leader Time by FedNet, your podcast source for floor remarks by Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. In these July 16th remarks, Thune discussed a rescissions package which would be set for a so-called vote-a-rama on amendments later in the day after votes the night before to advance the bill. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, later today, the Senate will begin consideration of the Trump administration's rescissions package. Reining in waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government is a priority shared by President Trump and by Senate Republicans. I appreciate all the work the administration has done in identifying wasteful spending. And now it's time for the Senate to do its part to cut some of that waste out of the budget. It's a small but important step toward fiscal sanity that we all should be able to agree is long overdue. Mr. President, 2 weeks ago, Republicans passed a historic bill. And the centerpiece of that bill is permanent tax relief for the American people. In 2017, Republicans' Tax Cuts and Jobs Act cut taxes across the board and had our economy firing on all cylinders. Now, we've made those tax cuts permanent, and we're setting up our country for a more prosperous future. And that starts with the American people being able to keep more of their hard-earned money to spend, save, and invest as they see fit, and to pursue their American dream. Mr. President, I know my Democrat colleagues are pushing their usual lines about this bill, that it's about billionaires and big corporations, not everyday Americans. But nothing could be further from the truth. This bill delivers big for working families in every corner of this country. It's middle-income Americans who get the biggest benefits from the tax cuts. In fact, Mr. President, people making less than $50,000 a year get the biggest proportional benefit from this bill. Not billionaires, not the 1%, not Fortune 500 CEOs, everyday Americans. People like waitresses and police officers, nurses and Uber drivers, farmers and ranchers, senior citizens, parents trying to provide for their families. Those, Mr. President, are the people who are going to get the biggest benefits from this bill. Mr. President, before this bill passed, these Americans were facing a massive tax hike next year. Some $2,500 for people in my home state of South Dakota. Now they can be confident that their taxes won't go up. Not next year and not in the future. Because Republicans have made the 2017 tax relief we passed permanent. And that includes lower tax rates for every income level. A $16,000 standard deduction, something that's used by 90% of taxpayers in this country. And 46 million families who can claim a higher child tax credit, $2,200 per child, that's now linked to inflation so that it doesn't lose its value. And we went further than just making the 2017 tax relief permanent. Seniors can now claim a new $6,000 bonus deduction. Americans can deduct the interest costs of a new car that's made in America. Parents can save for their children's futures with new investment accounts. Workers who earn overtime can deduct that overtime pay. Mr. President, that includes police officers, firefighters, nurses, and EMTs, people who put in extra hours away from their families to keep us safe and to save lives. Workers who earn tips can now deduct those tips. And that means bigger paychecks for a lot of hardworking people. One analysis suggests that Uber drivers alone will see their collective income rise by $1 billion because of the no tax on tips that we included in this bill. And other tipped Americans are looking forward to bigger paychecks. A waitress in Michigan said, and I quote, "I have 4 children, so that extra money would be pretty handy. It would either go toward them or to my house bills," end quote. Mr. President, America's farmers and ranchers are also breathing a sigh of relief with this bill. Amid some of the most challenging years for agriculture in recent memory, this bill bolsters the programs that farmers and ranchers depend upon. Things like crop insurance and commodity programs, conservation programs and disaster assistance, research and disease prevention. This bill addresses farmers and ranchers' challenges head-on. Then there's the tax component. Farmers and ranchers will benefit from the same lower tax rates that benefit working families and small businesses. They'll be able to take advantage of permanent full expensing for new equipment. And that means, Mr. President, that they can deduct the full cost of a new tractor or a combine or anything else the year they start using it. And they'll be able to take advantage of that provision whether they buy that new tractor next year, the year after that, or 10 years from now. Full expensing is now permanent feature and fixture of our tax code because of this bill. Our legislation also protects more family farms and ranches from the death tax. We raised the death tax threshold to $15 million, and it's linked to inflation. That means a lot more farmers and ranchers won't have to worry about the death tax eating up what they've spent their lifetime building. It means they won't have to worry about a flawed tax forcing their kids to sell all or a part of the family farm. And it means farmers and ranchers won't have to spend their time and money on complicated estate planning to keep their operation intact after they die. One Iowa farmer summed it up when he said it this way, and I quote, "One of my goals when I started farming was to be able to pass this farm on to the next generation. I'm doing that, and I feel very good about that," end quote. Well, Mr. President, we can all feel good about that. I know the last few years have been years of near constant financial stress for working families, for farmers and ranchers, for small business owners. So Republicans set out to deliver relief with this bill. And more than that, we set out to permanently transform our tax code so that it supports these hardworking Americans. A tax code, Mr. President, that supports bigger paychecks and lower tax bills. That enables the American people to save, invest, and spend more of their hard-earned money how they see fit, rather than sending it to Uncle Sam. Mr. President, that's the tax code that we're delivering.
Schumer also addressed the spending cuts, focusing on its projected impacts.
Mr. President, today, Senate Republicans will press ahead with a terrible bill that guts local news, defunds rural radio stations, and makes America less safe on the world stage. And they're doing it all to continue funding tax breaks for billionaires. Today, Senate Republicans turn this chamber into a subservient rubber stamp for the executive at the behest of Donald Trump. And do you want to know the most galling part of this whole bill that Republicans are hell-bent in dramming through? They have absolutely no idea how OMB plans to apply the cuts. Don't take my word for it. My colleague, the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, the senior senator, the senior senator and former Republican leader from Kentucky, and my colleague from Mississippi, one who said he's voting for the bill, all say the bill is lacking specific information, and some claim they haven't even been told how the cuts will even be applied. How can we devastate programs, rip away bipartisan funding, and impact millions of Americans without even knowing how this bill will be implemented? Republicans embrace the credo of cut, cut, cut now and ask questions later. Cut health care for 17 million Americans. Cut food assistance to hungry kids. Cut good-paying energy jobs. Let the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, get ahead of us. Never mind the kids who will go hungry, or the families who will lose insurance, or the people who will get sick and die. It's all worth it, Republicans seem to think, so long as billionaires and special interests pay less in taxes. Senate Democrats, however, know that our job in this chamber is to govern, is to legislate, not simply eat dirt from the executive and ask for more, which is what, unfortunately, my colleagues from the other side of the aisle are doing. So today, we're going to have a debate on the floor. Democrats are going to show the American people exactly what Republicans are doing. We will highlight through amendments the devastating cuts to local television and radio stations across the country, as well as the damage these cuts will do to America's standing as world leader. We'll hold the Republicans accountable through amendments wherever they claim they want to improve this awful bill and make it abundantly clear they have not materially improved this proposal. We will do everything in our power to mitigate the damage ours are unilaterally doing to the American people. Now let's talk about the cuts to the CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Millions and millions of Americans, over 10 million Americans, 13, live in regions of the country that will be affected by these cuts, including millions of rural Americans and native tribes. And these cuts to local stations couldn't happen at a worse time, with floods and natural disasters front of mind. When a flood happens, when a tornado touches down, when a hurricane makes landfall, people need immediate, up-to-date alerts to stay safe. And sometimes, all too often, public broadcasting is the only way for people to hear what's going on. It's a matter of life and death. So why is Donald Trump so hell-bent on taking away funding from local stations that can literally save lives? And it's not just public broadcasting. Cuts to foreign aid will make Americans less safe. It'll empower our adversaries. The changes Republicans say they made to PEPFAR are not enough, and nobody's fooled by the small tweaks to this package. Let me be very clear. Donald Trump's hatred of foreign aid has nothing to do with making government more efficient, and it has nothing to do with eliminating waste. It's incompetence, simple incompetence and cruelty based on an extremist ideology. Here's one glaring example. A very troubling report yesterday from The Atlantic saying that nearly 500 metric tons of emergency food that has already been purchased by the federal government is set to expire today and will quite literally be incinerated instead of going to hungry kids. Again, this emergency food could save lives. It could prevent kids literally from starving to death in places like Afghanistan and in Pakistan. It's been sitting idly in a warehouse in Dubai for months. And because of the administration's incompetence, because of the reckless canceling of foreign aid at the start of this administration, these 500 tons of food will be turned into ash. This is just one very glaring, very troubling example of how our Republican colleagues are really full of it when they say they want to eliminate waste. They don't really care about that. They care about just cut, slash. Use the Doge chainsaw just again so the billionaires can get their tax breaks. What's happened with this food is a deep violation, not simply of common sense, but of the moral obligation to care for the hungry and care for those in need, which our scriptures teach us. It is disgusting, and it crystallizes the core issue. Republicans do not care about eliminating waste. They simply want to cut funding and damn the consequences, even if it means kids starve to death abroad. It's incomprehensibly mean-spirited. But foreign aid is not just about charity. It's strategic. It's about American security, and when Republicans cut foreign aid, they expose Americans to global health risks. They make it easier for terrorists to recruit people in susceptible parts of the world. They harm our farmers and researchers and our businesses. Cutting foreign aid makes it harder for U.S. companies to access new markets. And when the Republicans cut American aid, they essentially tell China and Russia, the floor is yours. It creates a vacuum, which China and Russia are all too eager to step into. Now, Republicans know all of this. They know this rescission package is bad news, even though most of them still choose to support it. Listen, for example, to the words of our colleague from Nebraska. Quote, he says, "I am very concerned also about the emergency alerts that come to many places in Nebraska only through that rural radio," unquote. Or our colleague from South Dakota, quote, he says, "To me, it's a very serious concern, and there were just a number of these stations that would have lost over 90% of their funding," unquote. Consider also what our colleague from Alabama said with regard to foreign aid. Quote, "And I think that's important, not only being the right thing to do and the American way, but I also think it's important as we know that if we leave a void, it will be filled by our adversaries," unquote. Now, these are nice words. But every one of the Republicans, every single one of the Republicans I just quoted, voted yes yesterday. And actions speak louder than words. It does no good to express concern about legislation only to vote yes in the end. Again, We were not sent here by the voters to rubber stamp whatever Donald Trump wants. We were here to govern as a co-equal branch of government. This bill today represents the very opposite of that. It is enabling Donald Trump's lawlessness. At worst, this is just one piece of an evil puzzle. If Republicans get away with passing this bill now, we will likely be back here in the near future with other rescissions that cut things like health care, like housing, like food for kids. Donald Trump and Russell Vought have made very clear they want to keep pushing additional rescission packages with even more cuts. So it means that health care is at risk, education is at risk, housing is at risk, research dollars are at risk, money for veterans is at risk. Additional aid that keeps Americans safe will be in danger. Remember, Donald Trump and Republican leaders reportedly struck up a crooked bargain. If hard-right members of the House Freedom Caucus agreed to support the big ugly betrayal, Donald Trump would reward them with even deeper cuts to health care and other things the hard-right despises. Make no mistake, this is a short-circuiting of the appropriations process. What Republicans are doing through impoundment and rescissions compromises the legislature's ability to act as a co-equal branch of government, to reach bipartisan and reasonable appropriations deals that represent the best interests of this country, not merely the partisan wishes of a small band of extremists. So today, Republicans will push the Senate down a dangerous road. They will not only cede power to Donald Trump, but they will also tell the American people they won't fight to protect their hospitals, seniors, education, nutrition funding, public health, public safety, and so much more. Democrats will continue to fiercely oppose this package. We firmly believe in protecting public broadcasting. We firmly believe in the role of Congress in checking a reckless executive. We're going to fight every day to protect people's health care, their education, the care our veterans need, food assistance for seniors and other kids, making sure the needs of working, middle American families come first, not the billionaire class.
This program is copyrighted by Federal Network and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast. You can watch live action from Congress on our YouTube channel at FedNet TV.